The night was drowning in silence when the storm rolled across Ravenshollow. Rain lashed against the jagged edges of the forest, rattling the decaying branches like the bones of long-forgotten things. Through the curtain of mist and thunder, a shadowed silhouette emerged, a towering mansion standing defiantly against time, its blackened windows staring like hollow, lifeless eyes. Ravenshollow Manor. For 27 years, no one had dared to set foot inside these walls. Locals whispered about the Holloway family murders, but no one ever spoke above a hush, as if the house itself could hear them and retaliate. Children dared each other to step past the rusted gates. None ever made it beyond the first stone path. The air around the estate was heavy, saturated with a darkness that clung to the lungs like damp rot. And yet tonight, someone had returned. A team of 4 investigators, led by Eleanor Shaw, a seasoned criminal historian, stepped through the wrought iron gates. Their boots sank into wet soil as their flashlights carved narrow tunnels of light through the dense fog. They weren't ghost hunters. They weren't thrill seekers. They were here for something specific: evidence. Earlier that week, an anonymous package had been delivered to Eleanor's office. Inside, a small key, old and rusted, and a note written in an unsteady hand. "Look beneath the floorboards in the east wing. You'll find the truth the Holloways died for." No return address. No name. Just those words. The manor loomed ahead like a skeletal carcass of another era. Its once white facade had darkened to an almost greenish black, devoured by ivy and time. Broken shutters clung desperately to warped windows, and the grand double doors stood slightly ajar, as though waiting for them. Inside, the smell hit them first: mildew, decay, and something else. A metallic undertone, faint but sharp like rusted iron or dried blood. Eleanor signaled for silence. Her 3 companions, Miles Trent, a crime scene photographer, Rachel Vaughan, an archivist, and Dr. Nathan Cole, a forensic anthropologist, followed close behind as they entered the grand foyer. Their footsteps echoed in rhythmic pulses against the vast emptiness. Above them, the staircase curved upward into darkness, its wooden banisters splintered and cracked, the remnants of a once glorious home now collapsing under decades of neglect. Chandeliers dangled like skeletal remains, their crystals dulled and coated in grime. Cobwebs stretched across the rafters like fragile veins, vibrating slightly with the shifting air. Rachel shivered as she whispered, "This place feels wrong." Miles gave a nervous laugh, clicking his camera on. "It's just a house," he muttered, though his voice betrayed him. But it wasn't just a house. Eleanor knew it the moment they crossed the threshold. Something lived here still. The deeper they moved inside, the heavier the air became. There was a hum beneath the silence, so low it was almost imperceptible, like a vibration in the bones. Eleanor stopped at the base of the staircase, glancing toward a hallway on the left. That was where the east wing began. They walked slowly, their flashlights cutting swaths of brightness across the walls lined with torn wallpaper. Faded portraits stared back at them. Stiff, emotionless faces of Holloway ancestors captured in oil paint and trapped in eternal silence. Some frames had fallen, leaving shadows where eyes once watched. And then they found the room, the East Wing parlor. The door creaked open on rusted hinges, revealing a vast chamber frozen in time. Dust coated everything in thick layers, muffling the world into silence. Torn velvet drapes hung limply over shattered windows. A piano stood crooked in the far corner, its ivory keys chipped and yellowed, one cracked so deeply it resembled a jagged wound. Nathan knelt near the center of the room, brushing aside debris. "Look at the blood patterns," he murmured, running. A gloved hand across the warped floorboards. Stains, decades old. Rachel paled. "This is where they were killed, isn't it?" Eleanor didn't answer. She didn't need to. Everyone knew, and then Miles spotted it. "Over here," he hissed, gesturing toward the far wall. Half hidden beneath a collapsed bookshelf was a loose floorboard, its edges worn smooth as though someone had pried at it before. Eleanor crouched beside him, slipping the rusted key from her pocket. It slid perfectly into a tiny lock embedded into the board's underside. With a sharp click, the wood lifted. Inside lay a small leather-bound box, warped and cracked by time. Eleanor lifted it carefully, brushing away the dirt and cobwebs. Her breath caught in her throat as she opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, Polaroids aged and curled at the edges, their surfaces clouded with time. Eleanor held the first one up to the light, a family portrait. The Holloways, standing stiffly in front of the very same manor, smiles strained and lifeless. But behind them, in the upstairs window, barely visible, was a shadowy figure watching. Miles leaned in. That can't be. Eleanor turned to the next photo. This one was worse. Much worse. The Holloway children, 3 of them, sitting cross-legged on the parlor floor, pale and motionless, their glassy eyes reflecting the camera's flash. A blurred hand appeared in the corner of the frame, holding something sharp. Rachel gagged, stumbling back. The next photo showed the parents, William and Eleanor Holloway, faces frozen in terror, mouths open mid-scream, and behind them, symbols carved into the wall, circles within circles, sharp triangles intersecting spirals. Nathan whispered, "These aren't random. These are ritual marks." The room seemed to shrink around them. The air grew colder, denser, as though the house itself was reacting to the disturbance. Somewhere, deep within the manor, a floorboard groaned, long and low, like the sigh of something ancient and restless. Then, faintly, came the sound of footsteps. Not theirs. From above, the 4 of them froze, straining to listen. A creak. Another. Slow, deliberate. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. She raised her flashlight toward the ceiling just as the sound stopped. Silence reclaimed the room, thick and oppressive. Miles swallowed hard. There's nobody else here, right?" Eleanor didn't answer. Instead, she reached for another photo. This one was different, blurred, grainy. A dark hallway, empty except for something at the very end. A figure, tall, faceless, standing perfectly still. The caption scribbled on the back read, "It watches." Rachel backed away from the open box. "I don't like this, Eleanor. This isn't just evidence. This is something else. Something we shouldn't be touching." But Eleanor wasn't listening. She was staring at the last photo. Unlike the others, this one was crisp and clear, as though it had been taken yesterday. It showed the very room they were standing in, the parlor, but not in ruins, pristine, untouched, and standing in the center of the photo were the 4 of them, Eleanor, Miles, Rachel, Nathan, captured from above. Her breath caught in her throat. She slowly turned toward the ceiling, raising her light into the darkness above, and then they heard it. A low, guttural exhale, somewhere in the shadows above them. Miles whispered, "We're not alone." The silence was suffocating. Not the kind of silence that brings peace. This was heavier, almost alive, pressing against their ears until even their own breathing felt intrusive. Eleanor could hear her heart pounding inside her chest, loud and arrhythmic, as if it were trying to warn her. The box of photographs still lay open on the dusty floor between them, its contents scattered. That last picture, the one showing all 4 of them, captured from above, sat half-buried beneath Rachel's shaking hand. "Eleanor," Rachel whispered, her voice brittle, "we need to leave. Now. Whatever's in this house, it knows we're here." Eleanor didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the ceiling where the shadows pooled thickly in the corners like oil, swallowing the beam of her flashlight. The faint sound of breathing still echoed from somewhere above them, and then another sound. Drip, drip, drip. Miles swung his flashlight toward the far corner. A thin stream of dark liquid ran down the cracked wallpaper, pooling slowly onto the warped floorboards. Nathan stepped closer, squinting under the dim light. "That's not water," he muttered, his voice shaking slightly. It wasn't. The liquid was thick, almost black, carrying the sharp metallic tang of iron. Blood. But there were no bodies here. Not yet. Nathan swallowed hard and adjusted his gloves. Something's wrong with this place. The patterns on the floor. The bloodstains aren't random. Look at them closely. He crouched, brushing away decades of dust to expose the faint outlines beneath the grime. Strange markings curved across the wood, spirals intersected by jagged lines, small triangles positioned like arrows pointing inward. Eleanor knelt beside him, running her gloved hand along the grooves carved deep into the boards. "These are ritual symbols," Nathan said softly. "Sealing symbols, not summoning. Whatever happened here, someone wasn't trying to bring something into this house." He looked up slowly, his pale face drawn tight. They were trying to keep something inside. The words hung heavy in the air, sinking into their minds like hooks. Before Eleanor could respond, a sharp crack split the silence. The sound came from behind the far wall, muffled but distinct, as though a panel of wood had shifted. All four of them turned their lights toward it. Miles moved first, stepping cautiously toward the wall where the noise originated. His fingers brushed against peeling wallpaper and he stopped, tilting his head. "There's airflow here," he said quietly. "There's a space behind this wall." Eleanor joined him, tracing her hand along the edges until she found it. A thin, almost invisible seam running vertically from ceiling to floor. "A hidden room," she whispered. Nathan frowned. "Wait. A sealed ritual chamber and a hidden room? Eleanor, think about what you're doing." But she was already pulling a small crowbar from her bag. With a forceful shove, the panel groaned and gave way, revealing a narrow gap just wide enough for a person to slip through. Cold, stale air rolled out from the darkness beyond, carrying a stench so foul that Rachel covered her mouth, gagging. The smell was thick, mold, rot, and something sweet underneath, the unmistakable odor of decay. Miles raised his camera, his hands trembling slightly as he snapped a photo. The flash illuminated a short, stone-lined corridor leading into complete darkness. Eleanor stepped forward. "Are you insane?" Rachel hissed, grabbing her arm. "You don't know what's in there." "That's exactly why we have to look," Eleanor replied, her voice low and steady. "This house isn't just hiding secrets. Someone wanted them buried, and if we don't uncover them, no one ever will." With that, she ducked inside, her flashlight slicing through the suffocating darkness. Miles followed reluctantly, then Nathan. Rachel hesitated, standing at the threshold, staring into the abyss as though the shadows might swallow her whole. Finally, with a sharp inhale, she stepped in after them. The air inside was colder than the rest of the manor, unnaturally so, as though the stone walls themselves bled frost. Their footsteps echoed softly against the uneven floor as they advanced, the corridor twisting slightly downward. And then they found it. The hidden chamber, small windowless room carved directly beneath the parlor, its stone walls slick with moisture. The single bulb overhead had long since burned out, leaving only the thin beams of their flashlights to pierce the blackness. At first glance, the room appeared empty. But then Miles's camera flash revealed the carvings, hundreds of symbols etched into every inch of the walls, spiraling upward toward the ceiling like a language from somewhere far older than the house itself. Circles intersected with jagged lines, symbols burned into the stone so deep they looked almost alive. Rachel backed into Nathan, trembling. I don't like this. I don't like this at all." Eleanor ignored her. Her eyes were locked on the far side of the room, where a single wooden chair sat facing the wall. On the floor around it, a ring of melted candle wax formed a perfect circle, with scraps of something unidentifiable scattered within. She crouched and picked one up. It was brittle, yellowed with age, and when she turned it under the light, the truth sent a chill crawling up her spine. It was bone, human bone. Nathan knelt beside her, examining the fragments. "Phalanges," he said grimly. "Children's bones. At least 3 different sets." Rachel gasped, covering her mouth as tears welled in her eyes. "Oh God!" Suddenly a low vibration rippled through the floor beneath them. Faint, but steady, like a heartbeat buried deep within the earth. Then came the whisper. At first Eleanor thought it was the wind, but there was no breeze here. It was a voice, so faint it was almost inaudible, threading through the air like smoke. "Leave." Miles swung his flashlight wildly. "Who said that?" "Leave. Now." The voice was clearer this time, hollow, childlike, and it was coming from inside the walls. Rachel screamed, stumbling backward, but Nathan grabbed her before she fell. Eleanor steadied her breath and aimed her flashlight at the carvings again. That was when she saw it, faint but unmistakable, one of the symbols pulsing faintly, as though the stone itself were breathing. "Eleanor." Nathan's voice trembled. "We need to go. Whatever they were trying to seal here, it's still here." Before she could reply, Miles's camera went off again, the flash filling the room for a fraction of a second, and that's when they saw it. A figure standing directly behind Eleanor. The flash died, plunging them into darkness again. Eleanor spun around, her breath catching in her throat. Her flashlight beam cut through the shadows, but there was nothing there. Rachel sobbed quietly. "I saw it. I swear to God I saw it." Nathan grabbed Miles's camera and scrolled through the playback, his hands shaking violently. He froze when he reached the last photo. There it was, a figure standing barely a foot behind Eleanor, tall and thin, its limbs impossibly long. Its face, if it had one, was blurred, as though reality itself refused to hold its image. Miles muttered under his breath, That thing wasn't there. But the photo said otherwise. And then all at once, the whispering stopped, replaced by a new sound. Footsteps, dozens of them, above them, around them, closing in. The 4 of them stood frozen in the center of the chamber, their flashlights darting wildly as the noises circled faster and faster, like prey being surrounded by unseen hunters. And then, as suddenly as it began, silence. Dead. Crushing silence, until the bulb overhead, the one that had been dead for decades, flickered once, twice, and then it came alive. The chamber filled with harsh white light, blinding after so much darkness. And on the walls, they saw it. The carvings weren't just symbols. They were names, dozens of them, hundreds, layered over one another, every single Holloway, each name meticulously carved into stone, and beneath them a single phrase, etched deeper than the rest. The bloodline must never leave this house. The silence after the flickering light settled was not relief. It was suffocation. Eleanor stood in the center of the chamber, her breath shallow, eyes locked on the hundreds of names carved into the stone. Rachel clung to Nathan's arm, sobbing quietly, while Miles fumbled with his camera, muttering to himself as if forcing words into existence would keep him grounded. The bloodline must never leave this house. The phrase burned into Eleanor's mind, searing deeper with every passing second. Finally, Nathan broke the silence, his voice hoarse. This isn't just a tomb. It's a contract. Eleanor turned sharply toward him. What are you talking about? He ran his fingers across the carvings, tracing the edges of the etched names with careful precision. Look closely. These aren't random generations. The markings beside each name, they're dates. Miles squinted, stepping closer to the wall. Birth dates? Nathan shook his head slowly. No. Death dates. Rachel recoiled instantly, pressing a trembling hand against her mouth. And look, Nathan continued, his voice growing colder as the realization settled. Every time a new name was added, another symbol was carved alongside it. The same spiral pattern, repeated almost like a seal. Eleanor crouched to examine the lower carvings. The earliest names, from the late 1700s, were carved deep, as if into soft stone, their edges still razor-sharp despite centuries of time. As the dates moved forward into the mid-1800s, the spirals surrounding them became thicker, darker, and more violent in shape. It was as though, with each generation, something in this house grew stronger. Miles broke the silence, his voice cracking. So what, they sacrificed people to the house? Nathan nodded grimly. Or to whatever's inside it. Rachel's knees buckled slightly, and Eleanor caught her before she fell. No, Rachel whispered, her voice small and broken. No, we need to get out. We need to leave right now. Eleanor steadied her, but her own hands trembled. She didn't say it aloud, but deep down she knew Rachel was right. Every second in this place felt wrong, as though the house itself was aware of them, watching, calculating. Then the sound came again. Drip, drip, drip. But this time it wasn't coming from the wall, it was coming from above them. Eleanor raised her flashlight slowly, heart hammering against her ribs. The cracked ceiling above the chamber was stained dark in several places, and now thick droplets of black-red liquid slid lazily down the stone. Rachel whimpered and turned away, but Nathan stepped forward, his breath shallow. That's fresh, he whispered. That's not old rot. That's new. Miles swung his camera upward, snapping a shot with a trembling hand. The flash lit the ceiling for a split second, and they all saw it. The boards above them were split open in places, and through the gaps something pale hung loosely, swaying ever so slightly. Skin, human skin, Rachel screamed. Out, Eleanor ordered, her voice low but urgent. We need to get out now. They scrambled back into the narrow corridor, the air heavier and colder than before. The passage seemed longer than when they'd entered, twisting in unnatural angles, but they finally stumbled back into the parlor. The room wasn't the same anymore. The box of photographs they'd left scattered on the floor was gone. The furniture was rearranged, the dust disturbed. And in the center of the room, where the box once sat, a single photograph lay face down. Eleanor bent down, hesitating for just a moment before flipping it over. It was a portrait, an old sepia-toned family, photograph showing the original Holloways, 12 figures standing stiffly in front of the manor. At first glance it seemed ordinary, but then Eleanor noticed the detail that made her throat tighten. Each of the Holloway's eyes had been carefully scratched out. Miles backed away, shaking his head violently. No. Nope, we're leaving. We're not staying here another second. But Nathan was still staring at the photograph, frozen. Eleanor, he whispered. Look at the shadows. She took the photo from him and held it closer to the flashlight beam. He was right. Behind the Holloway family, the shape of the house loomed, but its silhouette was wrong. The angles were distorted, the windows mismatched, as though the house itself was bending unnaturally, and in the highest window of the manor, a face stared back. Not human. Not entirely. Okay, Eleanor said finally, forcing steel into her voice. Listen to me. Something happened in this house, something tied to this family, and we need to know what before we walk blindly into it. If we don't understand the rules, we won't survive this. Rachel shook her head violently. I don't care what happened here. I don't want to understand. I want to leave. But Eleanor didn't move. She stared at the staircase at the far end of the hall, the one leading up into the darkened second floor where the boards above the chamber had dripped blood. The answers are up there, she said softly. Miles cursed under his breath, grabbing his camera, but he followed her. Nathan hesitated, glancing at Rachel, who stood pale and trembling by the doorway. You stay here if you want, Eleanor said firmly, but I'm going. Nathan looked at Rachel one last time before sighing and following Eleanor up the stairs. Rachel stood frozen at the bottom, hugging herself tightly, whispering under her breath as if repeating a prayer she barely remembered. The second floor was worse than the first. The hallway stretched endlessly, lined with faded portraits of Holloway ancestors. Each face seemed carefully painted, but their expressions were uncanny, too rigid, too lifelike, as though they were still watching. And then Nathan noticed it. Their eyes. Every portrait's eyes had been replaced. At first, Eleanor thought it was paint, but when she stepped closer, she saw the truth. Real human eyes, dried and blackened with age, but unmistakable. Miles gagged, covering his mouth. Jesus Christ. As they moved deeper down the hallway, Eleanor's flashlight caught on a partially open door. Without a word, she pushed it open, revealing a nursery frozen in time. Small cribs lined the walls, each one draped with rotting lace. Tiny rocking horses sat abandoned, their chipped paint revealing pale wood beneath. A single porcelain doll lay on the floor, its glass eyes cracked, staring up at the ceiling. Nathan crouched by one of the cribs, his hand trembling as he brushed away the dust. These are tiny, he whispered. Too tiny. Eleanor swallowed, hard. Infants. She turned to leave when a faint lullaby drifted through the room. An old music box somewhere in the shadows had started playing by itself. Rachel's scream echoed from downstairs. The nursery was silent again. The faint music box melody had stopped, but its lingering notes clung to the air like cold breath in winter. Dust floated in the beam of Eleanor's flashlight, drifting lazily, as though time itself hesitated to move forward. Miles backed against the wall, clutching his camera tightly. Rachel's scream still echoed faintly from downstairs, her voice distant and fractured, but Eleanor couldn't move yet. Something had changed in the room. The air felt heavier, thicker, like they were being watched. Eleanor, Nathan whispered, his voice cracking. We need to go. Now. She didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the far corner of the nursery, where a tall, antique wardrobe stood crooked against the wall. Unlike the other furniture in the room, its wood was pristine, untouched by rot, as though time itself refused to claim it. Then the sound came again. Click, click, click. Something was moving inside the wardrobe. Nathan reached out, grabbing her wrist. Don't. But Eleanor stepped forward anyway. Her heartbeat roared in her ears, drowning out everything else. With trembling fingers, she wrapped her hand around the cold brass handle and pulled. The door creaked open. Inside, hanging neatly, on rusted hooks were 6 tiny dresses, their fabric pale and stiff with age. Beneath them, a small wooden box rested on the floor, etched with the same spiral pattern they had seen downstairs on the stone carvings. Eleanor crouched, hesitating for only a second before lifting the box out. It was unnervingly heavy. Miles hovered behind her, whispering, "Don't open it, please don't open it." But Eleanor did. Inside, wrapped in brittle black velvet, was a book. Its leather cover was cracked and blackened, but still intact. Across the front, burned deep into the hide, were words written in Latin, sanguinem tenet domum. Rachel had just reached the top of the stairs when Eleanor whispered the translation aloud. The blood holds the house. The room felt colder the moment the words left her mouth. Nathan took the book carefully, flipping to its first page. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, almost frantic. It wasn't a journal. It was a manual. Upon the 12th generation, the Holloway line shall not wither, nor shall it scatter. Their bodies shall feed the house, and the house shall feed them. By the offering of blood, the door shall remain closed. Miles muttered, "What the hell does that even mean?" Eleanor frowned, reading further. "It means they believed this house was alive." Rachel backed against the wall, shaking her head. No, this is insane. You're all insane. That's just some old superstition." But Nathan wasn't listening anymore. He had reached the next section of the journal, and his voice dropped into a trembling whisper as he read. "When the chosen child reaches the 7th winter, the matriarch shall cut the cord that binds flesh to flesh. Their heart must not beat beyond the hour, lest the house hunger." He stopped reading. His face was pale. Miles shook his head violently. "Oh no. Are you saying they killed their own kids?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Suddenly the music box began to play again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from the shadows. It was coming from inside the wardrobe. Rachel screamed and stumbled backward, crashing into one of the cribs. The porcelain doll on the floor rolled across the wood, stopping at Eleanor's feet. Its glass eyes were no longer cracked. They were moving, shifting slightly as though following her. Then the wardrobe slammed shut with a deafening crack. Miles bolted for the hallway, but the nursery door slammed violently in his face, locking on its own. He spun around, pounding on the wood. "Open it, Eleanor, open it!" But she couldn't move. Her body locked rigid, every muscle screaming to run while her mind stayed frozen. From inside the wardrobe came a sound no human throat could make. Low, rasping breath. Slow, wet, deliberate. And then, from the crack beneath the wardrobe door, blood began to seep across the floor. Nathan grabbed Eleanor's arm, snapping her out of her paralysis. "We have to get out of here." The four of them shoved against the nursery door until it finally gave way, throwing them into the hallway. Miles didn't wait. He bolted toward the staircase. But before Eleanor could follow, she felt it. Something cold brushed against her neck. She spun around, her flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, and caught sight of a woman standing at the far end of the hall, or what had once been a woman. Her gown was shredded and stained black, her skeletal frame barely holding flesh. Her face was veiled, but beneath the thin fabric, Eleanor could make out sharp, unnatural angles, as though her skull had been reshaped. And then she heard the voice. "Blood brings you home," Rachel screamed. The figure began to move, slowly. At first, then faster, jerking unnaturally, her limbs bending in impossible angles as she lunged forward. They tore down the hallway, crashing through dust-choked corridors until they stumbled back into the main hall. But the manor had changed. Again. The staircase they'd used minutes ago was gone, replaced by a solid wall. The furniture had shifted, sealing off one of the exits. And on the ceiling above them, dozens of strange spiral symbols had been carved, dripping fresh blood. The house was alive, and it was rearranging itself to trap them inside. Miles collapsed, against the wall, gasping for air. We're not getting out, are we?" Nathan didn't answer. He held the journal tightly, flipping through its final pages. There, written in an even shakier hand, were the last words of the Holloway. "Matriarch, do not run, do not hide. The house remembers your blood." The manor was silent again. Not peaceful silent, but predatory silent. It was the kind of silence that screamed louder than any sound could, the kind that made your heartbeat feel like it didn't belong in this place. Nathan clutched the Holloway ritual journal like a lifeline as they moved cautiously down the corridor, their flashlights cutting thin beams through the thick, suffocating dust. The air was damp now, heavy with the stink of iron and mildew. Behind them, Rachel whispered, "I can't breathe down here. It feels like the walls are closing in." Eleanor glanced back. Rachel's pale face glistened with sweat, her pupils wide, trembling like a trapped animal. "You're just panicking," Eleanor said softly, though her own voice trembled. "Stay close. We're fine." But they weren't fine. None of them were. Miles kept muttering to himself as he filmed everything, his camera lens fogging slightly from the oppressive dampness. "This is wrong. This is all wrong. I shouldn't have come." Suddenly, Nathan stopped. His flashlight beam had caught something at the end of the hallway, a section of wall covered by a thick, rotting tapestry. Without a word, he pulled it aside. Behind it was a door, a small, uneven wooden door, barely tall enough for a child, its surface carved with the same spiral patterns they had seen in the nursery. But this one was different. Unlike the other symbols, these spirals had been filled with something dark that glistened wet under the light. "Is that blood?" Miles whispered. Eleanor swallowed hard, reaching out to touch the handle. It was ice cold, colder than anything in the house so far. As she turned it, the sound echoed through the hall like a bone snapping. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow stone staircase spiraling downward. Nathan glanced at the journal, his voice barely above a whisper. The house, it said there, was a chamber beneath the main hall, a place where the Holloways fed the foundation. "I think this is it, the descent." They moved carefully, one step at a time, their flashlights cutting through the dark as the stairs twisted deeper underground. The air grew colder with every step, and the dampness became unbearable, soaking their clothes, their skin, their bones. Rachel's breathing turned shallow, ragged. "I don't like this. I don't want to go down there." Eleanor turned, putting a hand on her shoulder. "We need answers. We need to know what happened here." But in the back of her mind, Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about the journal's warning. "Do not go where the house drinks. The stones remember." At the bottom of the stairs, they found a massive iron door. It was covered in deep scratches, as if someone or something had tried desperately to claw its way out. The handle was chained shut, but the chains had long rusted away. Nathan forced the door open, and the four of them stepped into the Holloway blood chamber. The smell hit them instantly. Rot, decay, iron. The room was vast, circular, and built entirely of stone. Dozens of tall, narrow pillars rose from the floor like jagged teeth, and along the walls were hooks, chains, and strange wooden contraptions Eleanor couldn't recognize. But it was the floor that made her stomach lurch. In the center of the chamber was a massive spiral carved into the stone, filled entirely with something black and congealed. The edges were stained with dark handprints, hundreds of them, layered on top of one another like desperate shadows. Miles finally lowered his camera. "What the hell is this place?" Nathan flipped quickly through the journal, stopping on a page covered in sketches. His hands trembled as he read aloud. "The house must be nourished. 12 shall bleed, 1 shall remain. The spiral binds the soul to the stones." Rachel covered her mouth, gagging. No, I want out. We shouldn't be here. We're not supposed to be here." The first attack, then they heard it. From somewhere deep in the chamber came a soft, wet, dragging sound, something moving, slowly, deliberately. Eleanor swung her flashlight toward the sound, and froze. From the shadows between two pillars, a figure began to emerge. It crawled on all fours, its limbs unnaturally long, its pale skin stretched thin over protruding bones. Its face was hidden beneath a rotting sack tied tightly around its head, but from the gaping holes in the fabric came the sound of ragged, wheezing breaths. Rachel screamed and stumbled backward. The thing moved fast, too fast. It lunged forward, knocking Miles off his feet and pinning him against the cold stone floor. Its skeletal fingers dug into his chest as it let out a guttural, animalistic hiss. "Help me!" Miles shrieked, kicking wildly. Nathan grabbed a broken chain from the wall and swung it, striking the thing across its back. It let out a sound like tearing metal, twisting unnaturally as it whipped its head toward him. That was when Eleanor saw its face. Under the sack, its mouth had been stitched shut. But the stitches were breaking, tearing, as though something inside was forcing its way out. "Run!" Eleanor screamed. They bolted toward the staircase, dragging Miles with them, but the creature was relentless. It crawled along the walls and ceiling like a spider, impossibly fast, gaining on them with every second. Rachel tripped and fell, and the thing was on her instantly. Its skeletal hands wrapped around her throat, and Eleanor swore she could hear whispering coming from its chest, as though hundreds of tiny voices were trapped inside it. Nathan swung the chain again, this time striking its head. The creature shrieked and collapsed, convulsing violently before retreating into the shadows of the chamber. The mark Rachel gasped for air, shaking violently as Eleanor helped her up. "Are you okay?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. Rachel didn't answer. Her skin was pale and cold, and across her neck where the creature had touched her, a thin black mark had begun to spread, veins darkening like spilled ink beneath her skin. Nathan checked the journal frantically, flipping through pages until his shaking finger landed on a crude sketch. A spiral carved into flesh. The mark of the chosen. Eleanor's stomach dropped. "What does it mean?" Nathan's voice cracked. "It means the house chose her." The hidden passage. Before they could process what that meant, Miles noticed something on the far side of the chamber. A narrow archway hidden behind a pillar, half buried under rubble. "We have to see what's back there," he said, his voice shaky but resolute. They squeezed through the gap, their flashlights illuminating a long, narrow corridor carved into the stone. Strange symbols covered the walls, written in what looked like dried blood. At the end of the corridor, they found a small room filled with dozens of tiny coffins stacked against the walls. Some were open, some weren't. Rachel froze. No, these can't be real." Eleanor forced herself to look inside one of them. Inside was the skeleton of a child, its skull cracked, its tiny hands bound together with wire. Miles turned and vomited, and then they heard footsteps behind them. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The night outside Holloway Manor was black and endless. But inside, the air felt heavier than death itself. The faint sounds of crickets and wind had vanished, swallowed by the oppressive silence that seemed to grow thicker with each passing hour. The group sat in the cold dining hall, their flashlights throwing broken shards of light across the decaying wallpaper, cracked mirrors, and dust-covered portraits that watched them from the walls with dead, glassy eyes. Rachel sat hunched, over at the edge of the long oak table, her breathing uneven, her skin pale and damp with sweat. The black veins creeping from her neck toward her jaw had deepened since they escaped the chamber below. Eleanor kept her distance, her eyes locked on Rachel with growing dread. Nathan stood near the fireplace, rifling through the Holloway ritual journal with shaking hands, muttering half-formed sentences under his breath, as if trying to piece together a puzzle he didn't want to solve. Miles paced relentlessly, his camera dangling uselessly at his side. "We should have left the second we saw that thing," he said, voice cracking with panic. "We're trapped in a goddamn nightmare. This isn't human anymore." Nathan looked up, his hollow eyes locking onto Miles. "No, It isn't human. It never was. The packed Nathan slammed the journal down onto the table, its brittle pages cracking under the weight of time. The others leaned closer as he flipped to a section marked by a faded scrap of ribbon. The ink had bled into the parchment, but the words were still legible, and they chilled them all to the bone. In the year of our Lord 1864, the Holloway bloodline was consecrated to the keeper below. The pact shall bind the house and all who dwell within its walls unto the 7th generation. 12 souls given, 1 spared. The stones shall hunger, and the house shall endure. Eleanor's voice trembled as she read over his shoulder. The keeper below. What does that even mean? Nathan shook his head. Some entity, something older than the Holloways, older than this land. They didn't build this house on cursed ground, Eleanor. The house is the curse. Rachel made a low, strained sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a growl. When Eleanor turned toward her, she noticed that Rachel's lips were moving, whispering something inaudible. What are you saying? Eleanor asked softly. Rachel slowly raised her head. Her pupils were so dilated now that her eyes looked almost entirely black. Her lips parted, and in a voice that wasn't hers, a voice deeper, older, layered with many voices, she spoke. The pact is not broken. The spiral opens. The words echoed strangely, vibrating against the walls. Miles stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. No, 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 this isn't happening. The house turns. Hostile before anyone could respond, the entire manor groaned violently, as though something massive had shifted deep within its foundations. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the cracked chandelier swayed overhead with a slow, unnatural rhythm. Then came the sound. Footsteps, slow, heavy, uneven. They echoed from the second floor above them, deliberate, dragging steps pacing back and forth, directly above where they sat. Nathan froze, clutching the journal. Nobody's upstairs, Eleanor whispered. Are you sure? The footsteps stopped suddenly. For a moment the silence was deafening. Then, bang, a door. Above them slammed shut with such force that the vibrations knocked a plate from the table. It shattered on the floor, and Rachel shrieked at the sound, clutching her ears, rocking violently in her chair. We need to leave, Miles said. We need to get the hell out right now. Nathan didn't argue this time. They grabbed their bags and hurried toward the front door. But when Eleanor yanked on the handle, it wouldn't move. The lock wasn't jammed. The entire door frame had fused into the wall. The wood and plaster seamlessly melted together as if it had never been a door at all. What the hell? Eleanor whispered, stepping back in disbelief. Miles ran toward the windows, grabbing a chair and hurling it at the glass. The chair bounced off harmlessly, not even a scratch. Nathan stared at the walls, breathing heavily. It's not letting us go. Rachel's possession deepens. They turned, back to find Rachel standing now, but something was wrong. Her posture was unnatural, her arms hanging loosely at her sides as though her joints were no longer fully attached. Her breathing was slow, deliberate, and when she finally looked up at them, her lips were curved into a faint, unfamiliar smile. Rachel, Eleanor whispered cautiously. Rachel tilted her head slowly, unnaturally far, until her neck cracked audibly. Then she spoke in that same layered voice. She isn't here anymore. Nathan stepped forward carefully. Who are you? The smile widened, revealing teeth streaked with blood. I am the unbroken promise. I am the 13th soul the house remembers. Before anyone could react, Rachel lunged at Miles with inhuman speed, slamming him against the wall with enough force to knock the breath out of him. Her fingernails had darkened, grown sharp, and as she raked them across his chest, shallow cuts began to form instantly. Nathan grabbed a candelabra from the table and struck her across the back. She staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, she let out a sound, not a scream, but something guttural, like dozens of voices screaming through her all at once. Eleanor grabbed Rachel's wrists and shoved her backward. "Rachel, fight it. Please, you have to fight it." For a moment, Rachel's blackened eyes flickered and her breathing changed. Her voice came out weak, broken, like it was coming from underwater. "Help. Me." And then she collapsed. The Diary of Agatha Holloway. While Eleanor and Miles tended to Rachel, Nathan searched frantically through the piles of debris near the fireplace until he uncovered something wrapped in decayed leather. A diary. Its cover bore the initials A.H. burned deep into the hide. He opened the first page and began reading aloud. "I, Agatha Holloway, being of sound mind, record these words so that the sins of our house shall not be forgotten, even if God himself turns his face from us. My husband, Thomas, brought the keeper into our home in the spring of 1864. We gave the blood as promised. We gave the 12, but the keeper wanted more. The keeper always wants more." Nathan's voice trembled. "She's talking about human sacrifices," Miles muttered. 12 souls. One spared. The spiral. Oh my God. Nathan kept reading. "On the night of the 13th ritual, the stones moved beneath us. The walls drank the blood. We thought it was over, but the pact bound us beyond death. Even now, I hear them in the walls. My children are calling." A loud knock echoed through the room, interrupting him. Knock, knock, knock. They froze, flashlights darting toward the hallway. The sound came from inside the walls. The awakening. Suddenly Rachel screamed, a shriek so piercing it rattled the chandelier. Above them, she convulsed violently on the floor, her body arching unnaturally as though something beneath her skin was trying to force its way out. The spiral mark on her neck burned black, spreading across her shoulder and chest like living ink. Eleanor held her down, sobbing, "Nathan, do something!" But Nathan couldn't move. He was staring at the floor beneath Rachel, where the wooden planks had begun to bulge upward, as if something massive was pushing from below. Then, faintly, they heard it. A heartbeat. Thud, thud, thud. Not Rachel's, not theirs. Something beneath the house was waking up. Clara Holloway's disappearance in March 1970 became the single most controversial missing person case in Ravenshollow history. The official record states that Clara vanished from her bedroom sometime after 2:43 a.m., the last moment her heart beat. Was recorded on the Holloway family's private medical monitor. No broken windows, no forced entry, no footprints, no signs of struggle, just silence. But the Holloway family wasn't surprised. According to their diaries, Clara had been chosen. She was supposed to be the 27-year sacrifice. The blood payment the manor demanded. But her father, Edward Holloway, refused. He defied the pact, believing his wealth and influence made him untouchable. That night, the manor proved him wrong. The FBI involvement. What most people don't know is that Clara wasn't declared dead immediately. 2 weeks after her disappearance, Holloway influence quietly brought in FBI Division D7, a secretive branch specializing in non-standard phenomena. Their classified documents, declassified only in 2003, reveal something shocking. Subject C. Holloway recovered alive, March 19, 1970, condition unstable, speech fragmented, eyes dilated, refuses direct light exposure, claims repeated auditory hallucinations involving the man beneath. Clara had been found, 29 miles from Ravenshollow Manor, deep inside an abandoned mine shaft, lying in a pool of cold water. There were no signs of physical harm, but her hair had turned completely white, and her fingernails were shattered, as if she had clawed at stone walls for days. The first interview. April 3, 1970 FBI transcript excerpts show Clara's initial interrogation. Her voice, described as flat, childlike and detached, revealed disturbing fragments. Agent Carter: Clara, can you tell us what happened the night you disappeared? Clara: I didn't disappear. He came for me. Agent Carter: Who came for you? Clara whispers: The one they promised, the one below. Agent Carter: Below what? Clara: Long silence, then softly: Below everything. After this session, Clara began seizing violently whenever asked direct questions about the tunnels. Her condition deteriorated so rapidly that the FBI brought in hypnosis specialists to bypass her conscious defenses. The hypnosis files. Project Hallow. In 1971, a series of 7 hypnosis sessions were conducted in a secret medical facility under Project Hallow. These sessions remained classified for decades. When fragments leaked online in 2003, they horrified even veteran paranormal researchers. Session 1. The Red Door under Deep Trance. Clara described waking in a narrow stone corridor beneath the manor, lit only by flickering candlelight. There was a door, but it wasn't wood. It was breathing. The red door pulsed like it had veins, and I could hear something on the other side scratching, whispering my name. Agents attempted to verify this by mapping the manor's underground tunnels. No such door was recorded on any blueprints, yet Clara drew it perfectly on paper, including symbols matching the Holloway altar carvings from 1848. Session 2. The Pale Man. Clara described meeting an entity she called the Pale Man, the same figure Thomas Holloway wrote about in his 1847 diary. He doesn't walk. He unfolds. His arms are too long, like ropes of bone. His face is wrong, no mouth, just smooth skin. But I can hear him in my head, like he's behind my eyes. Investigators cross-referenced this description with Holloway occult artifacts. They discovered multiple drawings from 1893 depicting the exact same faceless entity. Different artists, same image. Session 3. The Feast. This session was cut short after Clara began screaming uncontrollably. Her statements before sedation were transcribed word for word. There were others there with me. Children, I think. They were whispering numbers. 27, 27, over and over. And there was something on the ceiling, watching us, waiting to choose. Audio analysis of the session revealed something terrifying. A second voice layered beneath Clara's, deep and guttural, speaking in an unknown language. Linguistic experts concluded the voice was not human. The Forbidden Chamber in 1972, Division D7, followed Clara's drawings to locate the Red Door. After breaching a sealed passage beneath Ravenshollow Manor, they discovered a massive underground chamber. Walls carved with thousands of overlapping sigils, some dating back before European settlement. At the center stood a stone altar, its surface covered in blackened handprints. Carbon dating revealed the stone had been used for sacrifices since at least 1640. But the most disturbing discovery was beneath the altar, a deep, vertical shaft descending at least 200 feet into darkness. The air inside was warm and breathing. Clara's second disappearance on June 5, 1972, during her final hypnosis session, Clara began convulsing violently and muttering, "He's awake. He knows I told you. You shouldn't have opened the door." Moments later, the facility's power cut out completely. When lights returned, Clara was gone. No alarms triggered, no doors opened, no footprints left behind. Just an empty hospital bed and a single hand-drawn sigil carved into the wall above it. The same symbol found above the red door. Clara Holloway was never seen again. The leaked VHS tape. 1983 and 1983, a VHS tape surfaced anonymously, postmarked from Ravenshollow. It contained distorted footage recorded inside the manor's tunnels, grainy, black and white, time-stamped March 27, 1972. Frames showed Clara, standing barefoot in a pool of shallow water, dozens of hooded figures chanting in a language no one recognized, a massive shadow stretching across the chamber ceiling, and finally, Clara looking directly into the camera, whispering, "It's under your feet." Before the tape ended, a loud, metallic scraping echoed, followed by total darkness. The FBI confiscated the original tape within 48 hours. Copies leaked online decades later, but half the frames appeared digitally corrupted, as though something inhuman warped the footage itself. The tapes. Nobody was supposed to hear two more audio recordings labeled Clara H7 and Clara H Final, surfaced in 1999 on a paranormal archive forum. They were quickly removed, but not before a few researchers transcribed key fragments. It isn't the manor. The manor is just the skin. What's underneath? It's older than people, older than words. And then, in a voice both hers and not hers, "When the gate opens, time will fold. We won't be here when it happens." Experts later confirmed that the second voice overlapped. Clara's perfectly, as if two entities were speaking through her simultaneously. The Holloway Seal 1 classified FBI report refers repeatedly to something called the Seal of Binding, an ancient ritual mechanism hidden beneath the manor. According to fragments of a Holloway family codex recovered in 1991, when the seal breaks, he will rise. The Holloways are not guardians. They are his debt. This changed everything. The manor wasn't haunted because of Holloway sins. The Holloways existed only to serve whatever sleeps beneath. Modern-day investigations. By 2010, after the disappearance of two live-stream paranormal investigators inside the manor, an independent research team attempted a full scan of the tunnels using ground-penetrating radar. What they found shocked even hardened scientists. Beneath the known tunnels lies a massive cavern system extending 9 miles outward. Within the caverns, several perfectly circular chambers appear carved by non-human precision. At the very center is a colossal hollow structure, roughly heart-shaped, and emitting rhythmic vibrations matching human brainwave frequencies. Put simply, something beneath Ravenshollow Manor is alive. The 2027 cycle, the next 27-year cycle, completes on March 27, 2027. Locals report increasing phenomena, flocks of birds crashing into the manor's walls at night, seismic tremors beneath the property despite no fault lines, and low-frequency hums audible up to 10 miles away. Whatever Clara tried to warn them about, it's waking again. By the early 1980s, Ravenshollow Manor wasn't just a local legend. It had become a classified federal obsession. After Clara Holloway's second disappearance in 1972, the FBI's Division D7 initiated Project Black Veil, a covert scientific program operating under the guise of an environmental research study. Its real mission? To measure, manipulate, and weaponize the anomalies beneath the manor. The first Black Veil team, 1981, led by Dr. Elias Rowan, a neuroscientist from DARPA, the first team consisted of 11 specialists, geologists, physicists, linguists, and 2 deep trance psychics trained to navigate non-physical terrain. According to leaked field notes from Rowan's personal archive, the manor's underground vibrations weren't random seismic events. The patterns repeat every 17 minutes, matching theta brainwave frequencies. This isn't geological noise, it's structured, deliberate. They believed something below was broadcasting, possibly influencing human thought. The sensory experiments. In October 1981, Rowan's team conducted the first sensory deprivation experiments on volunteers inside the manor's east wing, an area closest to the Red Door chamber. Subjects were blindfolded, immersed in total darkness, and monitored for neurological anomalies. Within just 11 minutes, all 5 volunteers reported the exact same hallucination. A narrow stone hallway, flickering candlelight, and a faceless figure whispering in a language they couldn't understand. The disturbing part, each subject drew the same hallway from memory, perfectly matching Clara Holloway's sketches from her hypnosis sessions 9 years earlier. Project Expansion, 1984A's evidence mounted. Project Black Veil expanded into full-scale experimentation. Magnetometric scans revealed fluctuating electromagnetic fields pulsing from beneath the manor. Infrared mapping showed heat signatures consistent with biological activity 400 feet below ground. Ultrasonic interference disrupted standard recording devices, producing distorted voices in frequencies too low for humans to generate. Dr. Rowan's notes grew increasingly erratic, with one entry dated March 2, 1984, reading simply, "It's thinking about us." The Psychic Conduits by 1985. Rowan introduced psychic mediums into the study, attempting to establish direct communication with the source beneath the manor. 4 candidates underwent deep trance induction sessions, monitored by EEGs and controlled hallucinogens. Session transcripts remain partially classified, but fragments reveal chilling patterns. Subject 3. It's not dead. It sleeps. The walls are its ribs. Subject 4. Weeping. We shouldn't be here. It knows my name. Rowan. Ask what it wants. Subject 3. Long pause. It wants us to finish what the Holloways began. After this session, 2 of the psychic conduits never recovered, lapsing into permanent catatonia. Their EEG scans showed constant delta wave activity, as if their minds were locked in an endless dream. The language of the deep in 1987. Linguist Dr. Marjorie Keane discovered something extraordinary. The sigils carved into the chamber walls beneath the manor matched symbols found at 5 separate archaeological sites, ranging from pre-Columbian Mexico to Neolithic Turkey. These cultures had no known contact, yet the symbols were identical. Using AI-assisted decoding, Dr. Keane reconstructed fragments of what appeared to be a phonetic language, which she called Veilanic. Its translations suggested horrifying concepts. Beneath the roots lies the first sleeper. When the veil thins, time becomes hunger. Blood pays the debt. Flesh opens the way. Keane's final report included a handwritten warning scrawled in the margins. Stop reading it aloud. Within 3 days, Dr. Keane was dead, her body found inside her locked office, lips torn as though she had bitten through them. On her desk, investigators discovered a single audio recorder. The tape contained 37 minutes of guttural sounds, followed by her voice, screaming the same 3 words over and over. It's underneath us. The incident of 1989. The mass blackout. On August 12, 1989, at 3:17 a.m., every monitoring system inside the manor went offline simultaneously. Security logs show that in the 7 minutes and 42 seconds before power was restored, every motion sensor in the lower tunnels triggered at once. Infrared recordings later revealed over 40 moving heat signatures in the chamber. Even though the Black Veil team confirmed they were the only ones underground at the time. Audio recovered from this night contains whispers overlapping in 9 distinct voices, repeating a single phrase. The seal weakens. The Holloway protocol following the blackout, Project Black Veil activated something called the Holloway Protocol. According to a declassified memo, in the event of active emergence, terminate all conduits, destroy site schematics, and neutralize residual witnesses. 3 days later, 4 junior researchers on Rowan's team were found dead under suicide rulings, all hung by identical braided ropes made from Holloway family burial linens. Rowan stopped signing his notes after this point. His handwriting, became sharp, erratic. The last legible line he ever wrote, dated September 21st, 1989, read, "The heartbeat is getting louder." The 1998 disappearances. In May 1998, a second-generation Black Veil team attempted to reopen the Red Door chamber for further exploration. Leading the operation was Dr. Lucien Rourke, a military biophysicist obsessed with controlled resonance manipulation. Within 72 hours, 4 of Rourke's top researchers, Dr. Blake, Dr. Keene's replacement, Dr. Avila, technician Marin Crow, and psychic conduit Issa Osei, burned every single note, map, and recording connected to their work. Security cameras show them setting fire to entire filing cabinets inside the lab's incineration chamber, crying and repeating the same phrase, "It's awake. It knows we're listening." That night, all 4 disappeared without a trace. No bodies, no evidence of escape. Just one thing left behind, a single handprint on the inside of the incinerator door, larger than any human hand ever recorded. The forbidden frequency. In 2001, an independent researcher named Evelyn Hart obtained fragments of Black Veil's classified data and analyzed the manor's underground resonance signatures. Her findings were horrifying. The subterranean vibrations weren't random. They were pulsed signals. The intervals aligned with human cardiac rhythms. And the primary frequency measured exactly 4.27 Hz, a frequency known in neurological studies to induce fear, paranoia, and hallucinations. Hart concluded the phenomenon wasn't just beneath the manor, it was weaponizing the human brain. Her final report ended with a chilling sentence: "We are inside its nervous system." The coming convergence. Every 27 years, anomalies around Ravenshollow spike violently. Electrical disturbances, mass hallucinations, livestock mutilations, and the vanishing of entire families. The next cycle completes on March 27, 2027, less than 2 years away. Internal Black Veil memos leaked in 2015 confirm the agency is preparing Containment Phase 0, an operation involving sealing a 5-mile exclusion zone around Ravenshollow, deploying deep earth sonic charges to reset the subterranean chamber. And, most disturbing of all, using human psychic amplifiers to rewrite localized consciousness fields. In other words, they plan to erase Ravenshollow from human memory. By the time 1998 arrived, Project Black Veil had been dormant for nearly a decade. The 1989 mass blackout left the first team fractured, traumatized, and terrified to continue. But something about the manor wouldn't stay silent. Reports of distorted electromagnetic activity, mass bird deaths, and unexplained disappearances around Ravenshollow began spiking again in early 1997, forcing the agency to reopen the case. Second-generation Black Veil team, known internally as Unit S13, was assembled under the leadership of Dr. Lucien Rourke, a military biophysicist obsessed with consciousness manipulation. Their mission was simple: re-enter the sealed Red Door chamber beneath Ravenshollow Manor and find the source of the anomaly. 3 days later, 4 of those researchers would vanish forever. The last evidence of their existence, 4 hours and 17 minutes of classified footage, became known within the agency as the Forbidden Chamber Tapes. The Descent, 1998, Ho514, 220417. The recovered footage begins in near-total darkness. A green night vision filter washes the frame in static grain. The camera is strapped to technician Marin Crow's helmet. She breathes heavily as the team descends a spiral staircase carved directly into bedrock. Faint, dripping echoes around them. Rourke, low whisper. Once we reach Chamber Theta, maintain total silence. Crow, why silence? Rourke, because sound wakes it. At 173 feet below ground, the team encounters the red door. Unlike earlier photographs, the door isn't sealed anymore. It hangs slightly ajar, as though something inside had forced it open. Inside the forbidden chamber, on 22/19/42, the team enters the chamber. The walls are slick with condensation, carved with thousands of sigils spiraling toward a central obsidian altar. No one speaks. The audio registers only faint, rhythmic vibrations, too low for the human ear, but enough to make the microphone crackle. Then, a voice, not from any of them, not from the radio comms, from beneath the floor, unintelligible whispering in 9 overlapping tones. The sound lasts exactly 3.7 seconds before cutting off. Rourke freezes, lifts his hand, and silently signals everyone to switch to oxygen masks. He'd been warned about atmospheric triggers. The obsidian heart at the chamber's center rests a smooth, black monolith, perfectly cylindrical, roughly 7 feet tall. Carved into its surface are moving patterns, impossible geometries that seem to shift when viewed from different angles. Dr. Avila, replacing Dr. Keene after her death, approaches it with a handheld scanner. Avila, shaking. These readings, they're impossible. The surface temperature is -12 Celsius, but the core's emitting pauses. Heat signatures from inside. Suddenly, the patterns stop shifting. The monolith emits a single low-frequency pulse, rattling the camera lens. The static spikes violently. Crow whispers into the recorder. Crow whisper, "I think it just heard us." The first loss, 22:31:98 exactly, 22:31:09. The first incident occurs. Psychic conduit Isa Osei, who had been monitoring resonance feedback, begins convulsing violently. Her EEG monitor spikes off the charts. Osei screaming, "It knows my name! Stop saying my name!" Rourke, "Restrain her!" Crow, "She's not breathing right." Loud impact, static distortion. Osei's body goes rigid. Her pupils dilate to full black. Then, in an impossibly low tone, not her voice, "We waited." Her chest collapses inward as though crushed by an unseen force. When the team regains their senses, she's gone, simply vanished, leaving only her EEG headset sparking on the floor. The second signal at 22:42:51, the chamber's vibrations intensify. The microphones begin capturing an ultra-low harmonic tone, measured later at 427 Hz, the same fear frequency identified by Evelyn Hart in 2001. This tone isn't external. It originates inside the skulls of the remaining team members. You can hear them start to break down psychologically. Crow, "I hear voices. Are you hearing them?" Avila, "It's whispering inside my head. My thoughts aren't mine anymore." Rourke, "Keep recording." The tunnel that shouldn't exist at 23:04:33. Thermal imaging detects an open corridor behind the monolith, yet earlier schematics of the chamber show no such passage. The camera follows Rourke and Crow as they crawl through a jagged crevice, barely wide enough to fit their bodies. The deeper they go, the more the laws of physics begin to fail. Their compasses spin erratically. Watches desynchronize by up to 47 seconds per minute. The camera records double frames, as though time itself is stuttering. The pit of echoes, they emerge into a circular cavern where the floor drops away into an abyss. From below rises a strange, pulsing glow, almost biological, like phosphorescent veins beneath translucent stone. Then, without warning, the camera's infrared sensors pick up 43 distinct heat signatures rising from the pit. Crow, panicked, "Oh my God, there are people down there." Rourke, "No, there can't be." Avila, "Then what the hell are they?" The shapes begin to move, climbing, crawling, pulling themselves upward in silence. But as they reach the light, the footage corrupts violently, showing only fragmented, incomplete frames, limbs bending in directions no human anatomy allows. The third loss, 231107 Doctor. Avila drops the scanner and runs back toward the tunnel. Before she reaches it, one of the figures appears behind her, without sound, without warning. Its face is completely smooth, skin stretched tight over where eyes and a mouth should be. It touches her shoulder. The lights explode into full static. When the frame clears, Avila is gone. In her place lies only her ID badge, melted into the stone floor. The red handprint at 231928. Crow points her camera at the chamber wall. For a split second, there's nothing unusual, just sigils carved deep into obsidian. Then, directly behind her, a massive red handprint slowly forms in real time, pressing outward from the inside of the wall. Crow, sobbing. It's trying to come through. Audio drops to silence for 6.6 seconds. Then a single word, low and guttural, cuts through the static. Soon, the final 40 seconds at 23:44:51. The footage destabilizes completely. The remaining fragments are reconstructed from 6 separate frames recovered in 2003. Frame 1, Crow's helmet cam shows Rourke kneeling before the monolith, hands pressed to its surface. Frame 2, the monolith opens, revealing a hollow core filled with pulsating black liquid. Frame 3, multiple arms, far too long, jointed incorrectly, emerge from the opening. Frame 4, Crow drops the camera, the view flips upside down. Frame 5, Rourke screams, but the sound comes backwards. Frame 6, a final image, a human face fused into the monolith surface, mouth open in a silent scream. Then the tape ends. No bodies were ever recovered. Just the camera, and a single fingerprint on the inside of the lens cover, matching no known DNA. Omega Seal Protocol. Following the 1998 incident, Project Black Veil was immediately shut down under Omega Seal Protocol. All physical evidence, reports, and recovered artifacts were classified above top secret. But the tapes couldn't be destroyed. Every attempt caused the incinerator systems to fail. One report from 2002 states, "Whatever's on the footage resists deletion." The leaked clip in 2019, an 8-second fragment of the Forbidden Chamber tapes leaked on a private server. Analysts traced its origin to a Black Veil insider, but they never found the source. The clip shows just one thing, a single still frame of the monolith, and dozens of human faces trapped beneath its surface, eyes open, mouths moving silently. Sound. Engineers enhanced the clip's corrupted audio and recovered 3 chilling words. "We're still here." The storm outside had grown violent, hammering against the walls of Ravenshollow Manor like the fists of 1,000 restless souls. The house groaned under the pressure, old beams creaking as though the very structure wanted to collapse and bury its secrets forever. Daniel sat on the cold wooden floor of the attic, his breath shallow, the photographs scattered between his knees. Sarah was pacing back and forth, her hands trembling, whispering to herself in fragmented sentences that made no sense. They were both shaken by what they had just witnessed. The faceless figure, the hidden chamber, the strange inscriptions. But the weight of their discovery hadn't fully settled in yet. Daniel picked up the photograph of the Holloway family, again, staring at the faint figure in the background, blurred yet distinct, lurking behind Eleanor Holloway's shoulder. The longer he stared at it, the more wrong it felt. Not wrong because of what he saw, but wrong because of what he felt looking back. His skin crawled as though some unseen thing was pressing against the back of his neck, watching him from behind. He slammed the photo face down, but the sensation didn't fade. Sarah stopped pacing and crouched beside him, her voice unsteady. "Daniel," she said softly, "do you remember the diaries we found in Eleanor's vanity chest?" He nodded without looking up. She mentioned a name, someone called Nathaniel Wren. The way she wrote about him, it's like she blamed him for everything. Daniel's mind raced. Nathaniel Wren. The name tugged at something deep, something buried. He remembered seeing the name etched faintly into one of the wooden beams downstairs, near the manor's grand staircase. At the time, he thought it belonged to an old craftsman, maybe a builder or servant, but now, that assumption felt naive. Sarah reached into her satchel and pulled out Eleanor's tattered diary. Flipping through the brittle, yellowed pages, she found the entry she was looking for. She read aloud in a trembling whisper, "Nathaniel came again today. He says the house isn't finished, that the foundation requires blood before the walls can hold their weight. I told him we've already given enough, but he said the land remembers and it always collects its debt." Daniel and Sarah exchanged a look of pure dread. They needed answers, and only one place had a chance of giving them. The Ravenshollow Township Archives, hidden beneath the ruins of the old courthouse 2 miles away. The storm was relentless. As they drove through the winding roads leading away from the manor, their headlights slicing through sheets of rain. The town itself was long dead, its streets lined with crumbling brick facades, broken windows, and signs faded beyond recognition. The courthouse was nothing but a skeletal ruin, overtaken by vines and rot, yet the archives beneath it were rumored to have survived untouched. Daniel forced open the heavy iron doors leading to the basement, and a damp, earthy smell hit them instantly. Dust coated every surface, and their footsteps echoed through the narrow stone corridors as they searched for any records tied to the Holloways, Ravenshollow Manor, or Nathaniel Wren. It was Sarah who found the first clue. An old blueprint rolled tightly and bound with a black ribbon. As she unrolled it on the dusty wooden table, they immediately saw something was wrong. The manor's blueprints didn't match reality. The visible floors and rooms they had explored made up only a fraction of the structure. Dozens of additional chambers were marked beneath the foundations, interconnected through a labyrinth of hidden tunnels. At the very bottom of the blueprint was an inscription carved directly into the paper. Built in alignment with the veil, entrances must remain hidden until the offering is complete. Beneath that signature was the name Nathaniel Wren, dated 1847, nearly 2 decades before the Holloway family ever moved into Ravenshollow. Daniel leaned closer, tracing the symbols printed along the foundation walls. They weren't architectural markings. They were sigils, designed to channel something through the structure of the house itself. This wasn't just a home. It was a vessel. Sarah dug deeper into the archive boxes and uncovered an old leather-bound ledger filled with notes penned by Nathaniel himself. The pages were uneven, stained with water and dark patches that looked eerily like dried blood. His writing was manic, sentences overlapping, words scratched out violently. One passage stood out immediately. "The Holloways agreed, though they do not yet understand. The manor must hold them, body and soul, so the gate may open. But the land hungers. I hear it at night, whispering through the stone, calling for names and faces to be taken. Soon it will remember." As Daniel read those words aloud, a low rumble echoed faintly through the courthouse basement, like distant thunder, though the sound carried beneath the earth. Sarah's breath caught as she noticed something in the margins of the ledger. Dozens of small sketches of the faceless figure. Its shape was always the same. Tall, thin, limbs stretched unnaturally, its head slightly tilted as though it were listening. Nathaniel labeled it only once, in a single cryptic sentence scrawled beneath the drawing, "The Hollow Watcher." The realization settled heavily between them. Whatever haunted Ravenshollow wasn't a ghost. It wasn't even bound to the Holloways. It was something older, Something tied to the land, the stones and the blood that had soaked into them for centuries. The Holloways were simply one chapter in an ongoing ritual they didn't understand. When they returned to the manor later that night, the storm had begun to die down, but the silence felt heavier than before, like the air itself was watching them. They made their way back to the attic, blueprint and ledger in hand, and studied the layout again. If the blueprints were accurate, the hidden passage they had discovered earlier was just the beginning. Beneath the manor's east wing lay something Nathaniel referred to repeatedly in his writings as the root chamber. Daniel's flashlight traced the outline on the blueprint, and his voice caught in his throat as he read the tiny inscription beneath it. Where memory sleeps. Where the photographs are bound. The photographs. That single phrase shattered their remaining sense of safety. The images they had recovered weren't just keepsakes of the Holloway's final days. They were anchors. Physical bindings meant to trap fragments of memory, preserving them for the entity Nathaniel called the Hollow Watcher. Each scratched-out face wasn't random mutilation. It was part of the ritual. By erasing the human identity, the soul became nameless, leaving it unprotected and vulnerable to be claimed. Sarah suddenly gasped, her hand trembling as she picked up one of the photos from the scattered pile. In the corner of the frame, barely visible beneath layers of dust, she spotted the faintest etching, a symbol identical to the ones on Nathaniel's blueprints. The photographs weren't cursed, they were the curse. The Watcher wasn't bound to Ravenshollow Manor. It was bound to anyone who touched or remembered the faces in the photographs. Just then, a deep, resonant sound echoed through the walls, like a distant choir humming in unison. The candles they had lit around them flickered violently, their flames stretching unnaturally high before being snuffed out all at once. Darkness swallowed the attic, and in that silence Daniel heard something faint, a whisper so soft it almost didn't exist, yet it vibrated against his skull like a thought that wasn't his own. You've seen their faces, now it sees yours. Sarah screamed, fumbling for her flashlight, but before she could turn it on, the air shifted violently, carrying with it a smell of damp earth and rot. Daniel's chest tightened as he realized what was happening. They hadn't uncovered the truth. They had triggered it. Ravenshollow was awake now, and whatever slept beneath it was no longer sleeping. By December 28, 2019, just hours after the final drone F2 transmission from Vault Theta was recovered, Black Veil's Crisis Directorate authorized an unprecedented breach protocol codenamed Glass Seraph, a last resort infiltration designed to enter the monolith chamber and recover physical evidence before the vault structure became unstable beyond access. Yet before the team could deploy, seismic readings from Theta registered an anomalous harmonic spike, not at 73.2 Hz this time, but at 0.0027 Hz, a frequency so low it bypassed auditory perception entirely and instead induced a physical reaction in living tissue. Personnel stationed within a 3-mile radius reported severe nausea, auditory hallucinations, and uncontrollable compulsions to descend into the vault, several abandoning their posts entirely to wander barefoot into the excavation site without protective gear. Those who were later recovered were incoherent, muttering in fragmented repetitions of Margaret Vey's earlier phrase, "The body remembers. The locks dissolve. The blood is the path." This marked the first time Black Veil officially classified Ravenshollow as an Omega-grade cognitive contagion zone, meaning exposure to either the auditory frequencies or encoded sigils risked permanent neural reprogramming. To contain the outbreak, the Directorate initiated a hard perimeter lockdown and deployed echo detainment units equipped with prototype neuro-resonant helmets designed to block the subharmonic pulses. But as the units approached Vault Theta, their body cams recorded something the Directorate hadn't anticipated. The monolith's exterior was no longer static stone. It was moving. Thousands of hairline fractures had formed across its surface, But instead of breaking apart, the material behaved as if breathing, expanding and contracting in a slow rhythm perfectly synchronized with Margaret Vey's own vitals, which remained inexplicably stable and elevated in real time despite her being completely unresponsive. At 03:19 a.m. on December 29th, the first external breach occurred spontaneously when one of the monolith's fractures widened into a perfectly circular opening, revealing an inner layer beneath the stone that was neither mineral nor organic, but something intermediate. A translucent lattice shot through with glowing filaments that pulsed faintly like veins. Drone S7 was deployed into the aperture, transmitting a live feed as it descended 31 meters into the structure's interior before the signal stabilized. What it revealed inside the monolith sent analysts into immediate panic. The walls were inscribed with layered glyphic strata, hundreds of thousands of etched sequences forming a complex three-dimensional language that extended far beyond human linguistic models. Automated decryption protocols struggled to process even the first layer, but managed to identify repeating sequences linked to a term resembling subjugate vessel origin. Below this, massive spinal-like structures connected the inner chamber to a series of concentric rings embedded deep into the earth, each radiating an electromagnetic signature perfectly matching dormant signal logs from the 5 unopened Holloway vaults scattered across Ashcroft County. It became evident almost instantly that Vault Theta was not an isolated anomaly. It was part of an integrated planetary system designed to channel energy across a precise geospatial lattice, suggesting that the entire Holloway Vault network wasn't constructed by humans at all, but rather discovered and later weaponized by the Holloway bloodline. Drone S7's feed abruptly cut at the 28-minute mark when a secondary harmonic resonance surged through the chamber, causing visible distortion in its optical sensors. But before the signal terminated completely, the drone captured one final image. Margaret Vey kneeling at the center of the chamber floor, hands pressed into a shallow basin filled with a dark, viscous fluid, her head tilted backward at an unnatural angle as thin strands of luminescent material extended from the basin directly into her spinal column, fusing her body with the lattice network itself. Thermal scans confirmed that her metabolic rate had slowed to near-death levels, while her gamma-wave activity spiked again by over 900%, suggesting a complete suppression of conscious thought and a full override by external input. In effect, Margaret had ceased functioning as an independent biological entity and had become the primary interface for whatever lay beneath the Holloway system. In the following 48 hours, catastrophic effects spread outward from Ravenshollow. Electrical grids failed in 12 contiguous states. Magnetic compasses inverted polarity, and atmospheric sensors across the region registered localized distortions in gravitational density. Black Veil's astrophysics division discovered that these distortions weren't random. They formed an exact mirror pattern of an astronomical alignment that hadn't occurred for over 4,000 years, matching diagrams recovered from the Holloway codices. Those texts, once dismissed as encrypted folklore, described a 7-point convergence, in which the Vault network acted as a stabilizing cage for an entity referred to only as the architect below. According to the decoded passages, if the convergence destabilized, the architect would resume its shaping, a phrase repeatedly highlighted in crimson ink across multiple recovered manuscripts. But what truly disturbed analysts wasn't the mythology itself. It was the cross-referenced DNA evidence collected from Ashcroft County residents. Samples revealed that the Holloway bloodline wasn't simply a lineage of wealthy landowners. They were genetically engineered conduits, their entire biological framework optimized over centuries to interface directly with the Vault lattice, meaning the Holloways had been selectively breeding across generations to maintain compatibility with something not human. On January 1, 2020, seismic spikes peaked globally for the first time in recorded history, correlating precisely with data bursts emitted directly from Vault Theta's core. These bursts propagated through multiple military satellites, corrupting their firmware entirely before rerouting themselves into civilian communication arrays worldwide. Within hours, millions of devices began streaming distorted fragments of Margaret's layered vocal frequencies, broadcasting the Holloway cipher into every corner of the planet. Emergency response centers reported unprecedented mass hallucinations, shared nightmares, and spontaneous episodes of group catatonia, particularly among individuals carrying even trace markers of Holloway genetic alleles. Entire communities collapsed into synchronized trance states, whispering the same fragmented phrases simultaneously despite geographical separation. The locks dissolve. The blood is the path. The architect remembers. By January 4th, the Directorate received a decrypted partial transmission recovered from within the monolith chamber. The message contained only 3 sentences, but they redefined Black Veil's understanding of the entire event. Vault Theta is not a prison. Vault Theta is a door. You have already opened it. The implications were catastrophic. The Holloways had not been guarding something dangerous. They had been containing something that built Ravenshollow itself. But worse still, Margaret Vey was no longer the sole interface. Surveillance confirmed similar transformations emerging independently at 3 other vault sites, each involving individuals with Holloway-linked alleles spontaneously entering trance-like states before vanishing entirely, presumed absorbed into the system. The network wasn't expanding outward. It was awakening inward, synchronizing every biological conduit into a singular collective consciousness bound to the architect's will. By January 7, 2020, the first tangible manifestations began. Satellite imagery revealed concentric fissures opening across the county, forming geometric patterns too precise to be natural, each aligning perfectly with the underlying vault lattice. Within these fissures, ground-penetrating radar detected structures buried nearly a kilometer deep. Vast chambers carved from unknown composite materials predating human civilization entirely. But before excavation could begin, contact was lost with 4 entire Black Veil squads stationed on site. Their final transmissions capturing only subsonic tones and deep, wet clicking sounds resembling echolocation patterns. Acoustic analysis of the clicks suggested they were language structures, highly ordered, operating on cognitive frequencies designed to bypass conscious interpretation and instead imprint directly onto the limbic system, triggering intense emotional responses ranging from religious ecstasy to existential terror. The conclusion was undeniable. Whatever existed beneath the monoliths wasn't dormant anymore. It was communicating. On January 10th, Margaret emerged from Vault Theta for the first time in 17 years. She was barefoot, her shredded hospital gown hanging loosely from her frame, and her skin now fully covered in bioluminescent glyphs that shifted subtly in response to environmental stimuli. Her pupils reflected no light at all, appearing as perfect voids, and her movements defied natural biomechanics, each step unnervingly smooth as though gravity no longer applied to her body. Surveillance drones recorded her walking directly through a solid steel blast door without any measurable displacement of material, her form phasing momentarily into a translucent silhouette before reconstituting on the other side. By December 10, 2019, just 4 days after the official Ravenshollow blackout, the classified surveillance feeds recovered from Theta Prime's autonomous drones revealed a phenomenon that even Black Veil's highest scientific authority couldn't explain. Margaret Vey was alive, unaged, and standing at the epicenter of Vault Theta's inner sanctum, surrounded by spiraling sigils that emitted a constant low-frequency vibration at 73.2 Hz, the same resonance previously linked to the synchronized deaths of multiple field operatives. In the distorted infrared imagery, Margaret appeared barefoot, Her hospital gown from 2003 still intact, but shredded in several places, exposing skin that reflected light unnaturally, as though covered in a translucent membrane. Her eyes were almost entirely black now, lacking any visible sclera, and faint glyph-like markings traced the veins of her neck and hands, glowing softly whenever the seismic pulses intensified beneath Ravenshollow. But it wasn't Margaret's physical transformation that terrified analysts the most. It was her behavior. For 6 hours straight, she stood perfectly motionless, head slightly tilted, lips parted but unmoving, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Then, at precisely 04:33 a.m., she spoke for the first time in 16 years, though not in any known human language. Her words came in fragmented bursts of layered frequencies, overlapping in patterns that sounded like dozens of voices speaking simultaneously, male, female, and something mechanical all at once. The system's audio buffers failed 3 times attempting to capture the signal, but spectrogram analysis later revealed the waveform wasn't random. It perfectly matched the ancient Holloway cipher etched across Vault Theta's monolith walls. When decrypted, fragments of her words aligned with one message repeated across multiple tonal layers. The body remembers. The locks dissolve. The blood is the path. Immediately afterward, all remaining servers within Theta Prime went offline simultaneously, their hardware melted internally as though exposed to thousands of degrees in under a second, leaving nothing but warped steel and ash where the primary archive systems had been housed. Meanwhile, the effects of Margaret's awakening were no longer confined to Ravenshollow itself. Ashcroft County's population was spiraling into collective psychological collapse. Emergency calls documented hundreds of cases of uncontrolled blackouts, nosebleeds, and violent dissociative episodes among residents, many of whom began sleepwalking en masse toward Ravenshollow between 3 and 4 a.m. every night, drawn by a compulsion they couldn't explain. Investigators discovered that individuals most affected by the phenomenon all shared distant genealogical links to the original Holloway bloodline, including several prominent Ashcroft families who had lived in the area for centuries. One recovered. Hospital log from December 12th records a single chilling note written by Dr. Helena Preece, lead medical examiner at Ashcroft General. DNA samples revealed dormant alleles across 47% of county residents, matching the Holloway markers. Exposure to Vault Theta's resonance appears to awaken something pre-coded in their genome. This is not contagion. This is activation. Within 48 hours of this discovery, Dr. Preece vanished without a trace. Inside Ravenshollow, Black Veil's surviving field teams attempted to re-establish control over Vault Theta's perimeter, deploying containment rigs designed to neutralize the subharmonic emissions. Yet every attempt failed catastrophically. On December 15th, Containment Squad Epsilon 3 initiated an experimental dampening procedure designed to counteract the 73.2 Hz resonance. Midway through calibration, all 8 squad members simultaneously experienced massive hemorrhaging from their ocular cavities collapsing instantly, their neural activity ceasing within 37 seconds. Analysis later revealed identical lesions burned into the corpus callosum of each victim's brain, perfectly aligned with the Holloway cipher pattern decrypted from Margaret's vocal frequencies. These deaths weren't caused by environmental exposure or random biological failure. The Vault was rewriting their neural architecture from the inside out. The Whisper protocol was no longer limited to Black Veil's compromised servers. On December 17th, anomalous data began infiltrating civilian communication infrastructure nationwide. Thousands of cell towers and satellite uplinks received spontaneous, untraceable bursts of binary-coded frequencies emanating directly from Ravenshollow, embedding themselves into every connected network. Social media platforms recorded millions of reports from users claiming to hear whispers through their devices at night, usually between 3:13 and 3:33 a.m., the precise window when the Vault's pulses reached peak amplitude. The voices always said the same three words: follow the hum. Even individuals with no known connection to Ashcroft or the Holloway lineage began experiencing recurring, identical dreams, standing barefoot on cold stone inside a subterranean chamber, facing a monolith covered in glowing symbols while tall, featureless silhouettes gathered silently behind them. But the most disturbing development came when Black Veil's analysts discovered that Margaret wasn't simply a survivor. She was becoming the conduit for something that had been sealed beneath Vault Theta for centuries, perhaps millennia. Every time the seismic pulses intensified, Margaret's vitals shifted beyond human norms. Her core body temperature stabilized at 31.3 degrees, her heartbeat slowed to just 22 BPM, and EEG scans indicated a complete suppression of higher cortical activity. Yet simultaneously, her gamma-wave emissions spiked over 400%, suggesting her consciousness wasn't shutting down. It was somewhere else. When neural data from Margaret's 2019 scans were compared to records from the recovered Holloway family, experiment logs of 1894, analysts made a horrifying connection. Her patterns matched perfectly with signatures recorded from Subject Delta, a Holloway bloodline experiment classified as terminated over a century ago. The conclusion was undeniable, and Margaret wasn't acting independently. She was a vessel, a living access point bridging human biology and something far older, using her nervous system as a bioconductive relay for signals originating beneath Ravenshollow. By December 21st, the phenomena escalated beyond anything Black Veil had anticipated. Seismic data confirmed that all 6 unopened vaults across the Holloway lattice had begun resonating in perfect harmonic synchronization with Theta, generating a wave pattern unlike any known natural process. The signature wasn't random. When rendered visually, the oscillation formed an exact replica of the Holloway crest, a triple helix sigil theorized to represent the binding structure holding back whatever lay beneath the manor. Attempts to stabilize the pattern using localized EMP bursts failed. Instead, each attempt caused the resonance amplitude to increase, forcing Theta Prime into full evacuation mode. But evacuation was futile. Drones stationed on the manor's Western Ridge captured dozens of civilians walking directly into the open vault entrance, barefoot, unresponsive, their pupils fully dilated. None of them was seen emerging. Inside the vault, Margaret was changing. On December 23rd, drone F2 managed to transmit a final 17-second visual before vanishing permanently. In the footage, Margaret stood directly before the central monolith, her hands pressed against its surface, her body emitting an ambient bioluminescent glow that intensified as her ribcage visibly expanded and contracted at unnatural intervals. The monolith itself began vibrating, emitting a bass resonance that destabilized the drone's gyroscope systems, forcing the image feed into chaotic distortion. But for a fraction of a second, the distortion cleared, and something stepped forward from inside the monolith. The figure was humanoid but not human, its proportions elongated, joints bending backward, its entire body covered in shifting symbols that looked carved directly into living flesh. It placed its hand over Margaret's head, and in that instant, her body went rigid, her pupils rolled back, and every electromagnetic sensor within a 20-mile radius overloaded simultaneously. When the signal cut, 218 separate power substations across the state failed at once, plunging over 1.3 million people into darkness. By Christmas Eve, Black Veil had reclassified Ravenshollow as an unrecoverable event site, sealing off Ashcroft, entirely under the guise of environmental disaster management. But archived transmissions recovered later from deep network leaks show that the events were accelerating rather than stabilizing. Margaret was no longer contained. She had begun walking freely between vault sites, bypassing lockdown perimeters, and appearing on surveillance cameras miles apart within seconds, as though stepping outside of conventional space-time entirely. Field logs describe her movements, leaving behind localized temporal distortions. Clocks ran backward in her wake. Security footage replayed events before they happened, and eyewitnesses reported seeing after-images of Margaret splitting into multiple overlapping realities. By the end of December, analysts stopped asking what Margaret had become. The real question was far worse: what was trying to come through her? Spectral analyses suggested a multidimensional cascade building beneath the manor, creating localized gravitational anomalies that bent light and sound in unnatural ways. The vaults weren't tombs or storage chambers. They were seals designed to hold something in, not to keep anyone out. And Margaret Vey, willingly or otherwise, had become the key unlocking every one of them.